That's my life, and it can be a very lonely, it can be a very lonely life. But I mean, I chose it, and so that song is not. It's not dealing with people who are living on their own in sort of basement flats and things like that. It's my living on my own.
It's one of the most haunting farewells ever caught on film. A man, once the thunderous voice behind rock's most operatic anthems, stands frail in front of a black and white camera. He smiles gently, eyes filled with both love and something else, maybe peace, maybe pain. And then, in a quiet moment, he leans forward and whispers, "I still love you." Just days later, Freddie Mercury was gone. To millions, he was the flamboyant frontman of Queen. The man who commanded stadiums, shattered genre rules, and turned every performance into theater. But few knew what he had been hiding. For years, behind closed doors, Freddie was dying. And no one outside his closest circle had any idea. He didn't tell the world until the very end. And even then, it wasn't with a grand finale. It was with a whisper. So why did Freddie keep his illness a secret? What really happened in his final days, behind the curtains and away from spotlight? And what became of his ashes? The remains of a man whose life was anything but ordinary. This is not just the story of a rock icon's last days. It's the untold truth about love, legacy, and the silence that echoed louder than his most explosive song. Long before the world called him Freddie Mercury, he was Ferik Bulsara, a boy born into contradiction. He entered the world on September 5th, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar. The island, rich with spices and sea breezes, was a cultural crossroads between Africa, India, and Arabia. But Ferik wasn't just shaped by geography. His roots ran deep into the Parsi community, an ethnic and religious minority from India that followed Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic faiths. His father, Bomi Bulsara, worked as a cashier for the British Colonial Office. It was a respectable job, one that gave the family privilege and protection during a time of simmering unrest. His mother, Ja, was quiet but strong, the keeper of family tradition. As a child, Ferik didn't look like a future star. He was shy, delicate, reserved, but there was one thing that immediately set him apart: his teeth. For extra incisors in his upper jaw gave his mouth a distinctive look and an even more distinctive sound. Ferik would later claim that this unusual dental structure gave him a larger oral cavity, allowing him to reach vocal heights most singers could only dream of. Whether that was scientifically true or not didn't matter. It was true for him, and eventually, it would be true for the world. But his British citizenship, granted by the colonial status of Zanzibar, was the real game changer. It meant that when his homeland erupted in violence, and when his family had to flee for their lives, a door was still open. That door led to England. But before the music, before the mic, and before he became a legend, Ferik would go through a childhood filled with turbulence, transformation, and the early glimmers of the man who would become Mercury. What happened next would shape everything: the escape, the exile, and the slow, burning rise of a shy boy into a global icon. In 1964, the paradise that raised him turned to chaos. Zanzibar, once peaceful, exploded in a violent revolution. It wasn't just political, it was brutal and personal. Thousands of Arabs and South Asians were hunted, dragged from homes, and killed in the streets. And Ferik's family, Parsis of Indian descent, knew exactly what was coming. They had hours to escape. They packed whatever they could carry, left behind their home, their community, and a life built over generations. In the blink of an eye, they were refugees, forced to start over in a place that didn't look, feel, or sound like anything they had known before. They landed in Feltham, a gray, unremarkable suburb west of London. The skies were colder, the houses smaller, the silence heavier. For a 17-year-old boy who once swam in the turquoise waters of East Africa, this felt like punishment. The island's sun was gone. So were his friends, his school, his identity. But exile does something to a person. It strips away the surface and reveals the core. For Ferik, the trauma of losing everything didn't break him. It ignited something. Once in England, Ferik didn't fade into the background. He started studying art at Ealing Art College, one of London's grittiest, most creative spaces, where misfits and visionaries went to find themselves. It was here that Ferik began his metamorphosis. He studied graphic design, but his real obsession lived outside the classroom. He was sketching musicians, analyzing stage moves, and building a persona. He became fascinated by Jimi Hendrix, Not just the music, but the presence. The way Hendrix dominated the stage without saying a word. Ferrick wanted that. By 1969, he had fully stepped into his new identity. The shy boy from Zanzibar was gone. In his place stood a man with eyeliner, confidence, and ambition. He wasn't Ferrick anymore. He was Freddie. He joined a struggling band called Ibex, and within days, they weren't struggling anymore. He didn't just sing. He transformed the performance. He studied every crowd, learned what made them react, and then pushed harder. Within weeks, he had taken over, rebranding the group, changing its name, crafting original songs. He recorded his first demo, Green, in his London flat, on a shoestring budget, fueled by passion and grit. But Ibex didn't last, nor did the next project, Sour Milk Sea. But Freddie didn't stop. He wasn't just chasing fame. He was building something that didn't exist yet, a hybrid of rock and theater, drama, and rebellion. And then something clicked. A door opened, and behind that door were two musicians named Brian May and Roger Taylor. Their band had just lost its lead singer, and Freddie Mercury, burning with ambition, was about to walk through. The stars aligned in 1970. When Freddie stepped in to replace Tim Staffel as the frontman of a small rock group called Smile, no one realized what was about to happen, not even the band themselves. Smile already had the bones, Brian May on guitar and Roger Taylor on drums. But Freddie brought the fire. He wasn't just a vocalist. He was a force. From the moment he joined, he started pushing boundaries. He demanded stage presence. He demanded flair. He didn't want to just play music. He wanted to create spectacle. And he had one more bold idea. He wanted to rename the band. Brian and Roger hesitated. They thought it was too over the top, too dramatic. But Freddie stood firm. He wanted one word. Grand, powerful, slightly scandalous. Queen. The name stuck. And so did Freddie Mercury. The persona he fully adopted by 1971. He wasn't hiding who he was. He was designing who he would become. But there was one more piece missing. Enter John Deacon. A soft-spoken, 19-year-old bass player with a self-built amp and serious talent. He wasn't flashy, didn't fight for the spotlight, and that made him perfect. The chemistry was instant. Queen was complete. Freddie even designed the band's logo himself. Using his art school skills, he created a crest that blended all their zodiac signs into one majestic emblem. Lions for Roger and John, a crab for Brian, and fairies for himself, symbolizing Virgo. He wrapped it around a giant Q, crowned it, and added a phoenix above. It wasn't just a logo, it was a symbol of destiny. Now they had the name, the look, the lineup. All they needed was the sound. In the early 70s, Queen wasn't yet royalty. They were just another band with a big dream and no money. Their first album was recorded at Trident Studios, where legends like the Beatles had worked. But Queen couldn't afford prime hours. They recorded in the dead of night. After everyone else had gone home, it was brutal. They were exhausted, broke, and barely scraping by. When the album was finally released in 1973, it made ripples but not waves. Critics were confused. The songs were long, experimental, unapologetically theatrical. Freddie didn't care. He was playing a long game, and he was just getting warmed up. By 1974, Queen released Sheer Heart Attack, and something clicked. The songs were tighter, punchier. They started to find their voice. Then came Killer Queen, a radio hit that introduced Freddie to the world as something more than a rock singer. He was a showman, fusing vaudeville, opera, and rock into something no one had heard before. But even as the fame rose, the money didn't. Queen was still broke. Their label, Trident, was bleeding them dry. While the band sold out shows, they couldn't even afford proper apartments. Freddie lived in a damp flat. John Deacon couldn't get a loan for a house. They were famous, but they were trapped. So they fought back. After months of legal battles, they broke free, but at a cost. They had to give up massive royalties just to walk away. And that's when they made their riskiest move yet. Newly free from their label, Queen did something no one expected. They risked everything. They took their entire future and poured it into one record, A Night at the Opera. 7 studios, a budget that made label executives sweat, and no backup plan. If this album flopped, they were finished legally and financially. But pressure? Pressure made Freddie Mercury sharp. He walked into the studio with an idea so wild it didn't even make sense at first. A 6-minute rock opera. No codas. Just piano, guitars, opera, and madness. Bohemian Rhapsody. Even the band was confused. The label? Terrified. No radio station would play a 6-minute song, they said. But Freddie didn't ask for permission. He created a low-budget video in one night. Striking visuals, floating heads, dramatic lighting, and sent it out like a challenge to the music industry. What happened next changed everything. Bohemian Rhapsody shattered expectations. 9 weeks at number 1. Millions of records sold. A revolution in sound, in style, and what rock music could be. It wasn't just a song, it was a statement. And it elevated Queen from rising stars to legends. And Freddie Mercury? He wasn't just a performer now. He was an architect of pop's future. After Bohemian Rhapsody, there was no turning back. Freddie Mercury exploded on his stages like a force of nature. He moved like no one else, sang like no one else, commanded like no one else. His voice could cut through the roar of 20,000 fans and still sound like a whisper made just for you. That broken microphone stand he once snapped by accident, he turned it into a prop, his personal scepter. It became iconic. Just like him, by 1977, Queen had found their rhythm, and their audience was returning the energy tenfold. At Bingley Hall, something magical happened. The crowd, unprompted, began singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" after the show. A sea of voices, no script, no plan. Freddie stood there, stunned. He turned to Brian May and said something that would shape history. "We need songs for this. And so, We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions were born. 2 of the greatest stadium anthems ever written. Created not from ego, but from that electric feedback loop between Freddie and his audience. They weren't just making music anymore. They were creating moments, history you could sing along to. And Freddie? He wasn't finished pushing the limits. By 1980, Queen had conquered glam rock, but Freddie wasn't interested in staying put. He wanted something new, something unexpected. That desire gave birth to another One Bites the Dust. A track that fused rock with funk, built around John Deacon's tight bass line. It was gritty, edgy, and nothing like what Queen had done before. The band wasn't sure at first, but Michael Jackson, yes, the Michael Jackson, heard it and told them, "That's your hit." He was right. It became Queen's biggest US hit ever. And Freddie? He kept evolving. He embraced excess. Fashion, parties, pleasure. His life was lived in full volume. If something caught his eye, he bought it. If a party needed 700 people, a cake modeled after a cathedral, and rivers of champagne, Freddie made it happen. But with success came missteps. In 1984, Queen played Sun City in South Africa, at the height of apartheid. Artists around the world were boycotting the country in protest of its racist regime. Queen said it wasn't political. The world disagreed. The backlash was brutal. They were blacklisted, fined, and shamed in protest songs. Years later, even the band admitted. It was a mistake. Maybe not for money, they claimed, but still a decision that haunted them. It was the first major crack in their global image. And it wouldn't be the last. Around the same time, Queen started experimenting with film scores. They took on Flash Gordon, a project full of synthesizers, sound effects, and risk. The result? Confusing to fans, intriguing to others. It wasn't a rock album. It was something else entirely. But the real curveball came in 1982 with Hot Space. Disco, funk, synth-heavy beats, Freddie and John Deacon loved it. Brian May and Roger Taylor? Not so much. The divide was real. Freddie's new manager, Paul Printer, was blamed for steering them into club music. The sound alienated fans. The band fell into drinking, arguing, and emotional burnout. Hot Space was a commercial letdown. But then, lightning in a bottle. In a Swiss studio, Queen crossed paths with David Bowie. What started as a jam turned into Under Pressure. It was volatile. Freddie and Bowie clashed constantly, but the tension sparked genius. The result? A #1 hit, pure emotion, unforgettable rhythm. It was proof that even as Queen was fraying, Freddie could still pull brilliance out of chaos. But by 1983, it was clear the band needed space. For the first time since they began, Queen took a break. It wasn't just rest, it was survival. They needed to remember who they were before the final chapter began. By 1984, the break was over. Queen was back. And they came back swinging. They released The Works, an album that felt like a truce between their warring styles. Freddie brought the flair, John Deacon brought the rhythm, and finally, Brian and Roger got their guitars back. It wasn't just music, it was balance. Tracks like Radio GAGA exploded onto the charts. Sleek, modern, unforgettable. Then came I Want to Break Free, a bold anthem with a music video that featured the band in full drag. It was cheeky, it was fun. And in the UK, people loved it. But not in America. MTV banned the video. Fans in Rio even threw objects at Freddie when he wore the costume on stage. That moment marked a shift. Queen's U.S. popularity, once white-hot, cooled overnight. But Freddie wasn't about to slow down. He had something to prove. In 1985, he dropped his solo album Mr. Bad Guy. It was flamboyant, personal, and full of dance beats and emotional ballads. It didn't break records, but it didn't need to. This was for him. He filled it with inside jokes, dedications to his cats, and his own truth. For the first time in years, Freddie wasn't a voice in a machine. He was just Freddie. Then he shocked everyone. Freddie Mercury, the glam rock god, teamed up with opera diva Montserrat Cabell. No one saw it coming. He approached her like a fan, played her a demo, and sang her part in falsetto. She was stunned. Together, they recorded Barcelona, a song that mixed opera and rock like nothing before. It was strange. It was gorgeous, and it worked. In 1992, after Freddie's death, the track became the official anthem of the Barcelona Olympics. Their collaboration turned into a full album. And while many didn't get it, those who did saw it as Freddie's boldest artistic leap. But behind the magic, shadows were growing. In early 1988, Freddie was diagnosed with HIV. He told almost no one, not his fans, not even all his friends. He didn't want pity, he wanted to create. He walked into the studio with Queen, sick but determined. They recorded The Miracle, not as a goodbye, but as a declaration, a #1 album across Europe. And no one knew the real miracle behind it. Freddie's sheer will to keep going. But his body was changing, time was slipping, and Freddie Mercury was preparing for his final act. In 1991, Queen released Innuendo. It was powerful, haunting, and full of urgency. Freddie's body was failing, but you'd never know it from his voice. Brian May later said he was in terrible shape, but he still showed up, and he sang. Freddie refused to slow down. He asked them to keep writing songs, promising, "You can finish it after I'm gone." He meant it. Every studio session was a battle. But Freddie showed up, laughed, joked, and delivered the vocals with soul-crushing emotion. And then came a question. Can you sing one more? The track was The Show Must Go On. Everyone knew it was pushing him too far. His body was too weak. But Freddie didn't blink. "I'll do it, darling." He downed a shot of vodka, stepped to the mic, and delivered one of the most powerful performances of his life in a single take. That wasn't a man dying. That was a man defying death. In May 1991, Freddie filmed his final music video, These Are the Days of Our Lives. Shot in black and white to hide how thin he'd become, he stood in a vest decorated with sketches of his beloved cats. He looked into the camera, smiled, and whispered, "I still love you." No press releases, no fanfare, just a quiet farewell, hidden in plain sight. By November, Freddie made a final choice. No more medication, just painkillers. He knew the end was near. On November 22nd, he told Queen's manager to release a statement confirming he had AIDS. That evening, the world finally learned the truth. At that exact moment, lying in bed, Freddie smiled. His assistant said it was the most peaceful he'd looked in years. The secret was out. The wait was gone. Less than 24 hours later, at 6:48 p.m. on November 24th, 1991, Freddie Mercury passed away. He was 45. His death didn't just shock the world, it changed it. Freddie was the first major rock star to publicly die of AIDS. At a time when the disease was whispered about in shame, his passing forced a conversation the world couldn't ignore. And even in death, he left behind a mystery. Everyone knew he was cremated in West London's Kensal Green Cemetery. But no one knows where his ashes went. For over a year, they remained unclaimed. Then one day, his closest friend and former lover, Mary Austin, quietly took them. She never told anyone where they were scattered. In 2013, a small hidden plaque appeared in the cemetery with his birth name and the words, in French, "To be close to you forever." Signed only M. It vanished soon after. Freddie Mercury's story was wild, defiant, heartbreaking, and utterly unforgettable. He wasn't just a voice. He was a force. From Zanzibar to Wembley, from grand operas to raw rock, he turned every stage into his kingdom. He taught the world that the show must go on, even when it hurts. And in his final whisper, he left a message for all of us. "I still love you." And millions of us still love him back.